What is up, everybody? We're on day 129 of our Bible in the Year series, continuing on in 2nd Chronicles, and getting into some good stuff. Again, we're kind of recapping. 2nd Chronicles is kind of recapping some stuff that's already happened, but we're getting some new perspective, new details, things like that. So, it's interesting to read hand in hand with some of the previous tellings of these stories and good stuff, or read it back to back like we have. Either way, but we'll jump straight into it. 2nd Chronicles, chapter 22. Then the inhabitants of Jerusalem made Ahaziah, his youngest son, king in his place, because the troops that had come with the Arabs to the camp had killed all the older sons. So Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, became king of Judah. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Athaliah, granddaughter of Omri. He walked in the ways of the house of Ahab, for his mother gave him evil advice. So he did what was evil in the Lord's sight. Excuse me. Like the house of Ahab, for they were his advisers after the death of his father, to his destruction. He also followed their advice and went with Joram, son of Israel's king Ahab, to fight against King Hazael of Aram in Ramoth-Gilead. The Arameans wounded Joram, so he returned to Jezreel to recover from his wounds they inflicted on him in Ramoth-Gilead. When he fought against King Hazael of Aram, then Judah's king Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, went down to Jezreel to visit Joram, son of Ahab, since Joram was ill. Ahaziah's downfall came from God when he went to Joram. When Ahaziah arrived, he went out to Joram to meet Jehu, son of Nimshi, whom the Lord had anointed to destroy the house of Ahab. So when Jehu executed judgment on the house of Ahab, he found the rulers of Judah and the sons of Ahaziah's brother, who were serving Ahaziah, and they killed him. Then Jehu looked for Ahaziah, and Jehu's soldiers captured him. He was hiding in Samaria. So they brought Ahaziah to Jehu, and they killed him. The soldiers buried him, for they said, "He is a grandson of Jehoshaphat, who sought the Lord with all his heart." So no one from the house of Ahaziah had the strength to rule the kingdom. When Athaliah, Ahaziah's mother, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to annihilate all the royal heirs. It's a normal reaction of the house of Judah. Jehoshaphat, the king's daughter, rescued Joash, son of Ahaziah, from the king's sons who were being killed, and put him and the ones who nursed him in a bedroom. Now Jehoshaphat was the daughter of King Jehoram and the wife of the priest Jehoiada. Since she was Ahaziah's sister, she hid Joash from Athaliah so that she did not kill him. He was hiding with them in God's temple for 6 years, while Athaliah reigned over the land. This would be an interesting story to turn into a movie, I think. There's several biblical stories that I think would be really good movies or shows, like stories. They've just not ever been touched. It's a shame. Maybe one of these days, if I have enough money, I will. That's my promise to all of you that listen to this. If I have enough money one of these days, I'll turn some of these, either this or the Books of Kings, or I don't know. There's several that would be good, be interesting. Okay, chapter 23, almost at 27. Then in the 7th year, Jehoiada summoned his courage and took the commanders of hundreds into the covenant with him: Azariah, son of Jeroham; Ishmael, son of Jehohanan; Azariah, son of Obed; Maaseiah, son of Adaiah; and Elishaphat, son of Zikri. They made a circuit throughout Judah. They gathered the Levites from all the cities of Judah and the family heads of Israel, and they came to Jerusalem. Then the whole assembly made a covenant with the king in God's temple. Jehoiada said to them, "Here's the king's son. He will reign just as the Lord promised. Concerning David's sons, this is what you are to do. A third of you, priests and Levites, who are coming on duty on the Sabbath, are to be gatekeepers. A third are to be at the king's palace, and a third are to be at the foundation gate. And all the troops will be in the courtyards of the Lord's temple. No one is to enter the Lord's temple but the priests and those Levites who serve. They may enter because they are holy, but all the people are to obey the requirement of the Lord. The Levites are to completely surround the king with weapons in hand. Anyone who enters the temple is to be put to death. Accompany the king in all his daily tasks." So the commanders of hundreds did everything the priest Jehoiada commanded. They each brought their men, those coming on duty on the Sabbath and those going off duty on the Sabbath, for the priest Jehoiada did not release the divisions. The priest Jehoiada gave the commanders of hundreds King David's spears, shields, and quivers that were in God's temple. Then he anointed all the troops with their weapons in hand, surrounding the king, from the right side of the temple to the left side by the altar and by the temple. They brought out the king's son, put the crown on him, gave him the testimony, and made him king. Jehoiada and his sons anointed him and cried, "Long live the king." When Athaliah heard the noise from the troops, the guards, and those praising the king, she went to the troops in the Lord's temple. As she looked, there was the king standing by his pillar. At the entrance, the commanders and the trumpeters were by the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. While the singers of the musical instruments were leading the praise, Athaliah tore her clothes and screamed, "Treason! Treason!" Can you imagine? It's been 6 years since you thought you wiped out all of the lineage there. And you did not. And it's going to be bad for you. Verse 14. Then the priest Jehoiada sent out the commanders of hundreds, those in charge of the army, saying, "Take her out between the ranks and put anyone who follows her to death by the sword." For the priest had said, "Don't put her to death in the Lord's temple." So they arrested her, and she went by the entrance of the house gate, the king's palace, where they put her to death. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between himself, the king, and the people, that they would be the Lord's people. So all the people went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed its altars and images and killed Matan, the priest of Baal, at the altars. Then Jehoiada put the oversight of the Lord's temple into the hands of the Levitical priests whom David had appointed over the Lord's temple to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, as it is written in the law of Moses, with rejoicing and song ordained by David. He stationed gatekeepers at the gate of the Lord's temple so that nothing unclean could enter for any reason. Then he took with him the commanders of hundreds and nobles, the governors of the people, and all the people of the land, and brought the king down from the Lord's temple. They entered the king's palace through the upper gate and seated the king on the throne of the kingdom. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, for they had put Athaliah to death by the sword. I feel like there's a joke in there somewhere. The entire city was quiet because she was gone. Chapter 24. Joash was 7 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zibiah. She was from Beersheba. Throughout the time of priest Jehoiada, Joash did what was right in the Lord's sight. Jehoiada acquired 2 wives for him, and he was the father of sons and daughters. Afterward, Joash took it to heart to renovate the Lord's temple. So he gathered the priests and Levites and said, "Go out to the cities of Judah and collect silver from all Israel to repair the temple of your God as needed year by year, and do it quickly." However, the Levites did not hurry, so the king called Jehoiada and high priest and said, "Why haven't you required the Levites to bring from Judah and Jerusalem the tax imposed by the Lord's servant Moses in the assembly of Israel for the tent of the testimony?" For the sons of that wicked Athaliah broke into the Lord's temple, and even used the sacred things of the Lord's temple for the Baals. At the king's command, a chest was made and placed outside the gate of the Lord's temple. Then a proclamation was issued in Judah and Jerusalem that the tax God's servant Moses imposed on Israel in the wilderness be brought to the Lord. All the leaders and all the people rejoiced, brought the tax, and put it into the chest until it was full. Whenever the chest was brought by the Levites to the king's overseers, and when they saw there was a large amount of silver, the king's secretary and the high priest's deputy came and emptied the chest, picked it up, and returned it to its place. They did this daily and gathered the silver in abundance. Then the king and Jehoiada gave it to those in charge of the labor on the Lord's temple, who were hiring stonecutters and carpenters to renovate the Lord's temple, also blacksmiths and coppersmiths to repair the Lord's temple. The workmen did their work, and through them the repairs progressed. They restored God's temple to its specifications and reinforced it. When they finished, they presented the rest of the silver to the king and Jehoiada, who made articles for the Lord's temple with it, articles for ministry and for making burnt offerings, and ladles, make ladies out of silver, and ladles and articles of gold and silver. They regularly offered burnt offerings in the Lord's temple throughout Jehoiada's life. Jehoiada died when he was old and full of days. He was 130 years old at his death. He was buried in the city of David with the kings because he had done what was good in Israel with respect to God and his temple. However, after Jehoiada died, the rulers of Judah came and paid homage to the king. Then the king listened to them, and they abandoned the temple of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and served the Asherah poles and the idols. So there was wrath against Judah and Jerusalem for this guilt of theirs. Nevertheless, he sent them prophets to bring them back to the Lord. They admonished them, but the people would not listen. So this is something I think people get messed up a lot when they talk about prophecy today. They often describe it as only positive words, right? Even Bethel was big on this. They still are big on this. But I remember hearing Bill Johnson was doing like prophetic training or something like that. And he basically told people, think about whatever Jesus would say to this person if he was in the room. And so, if you think, what is Jesus going to say? It's going to be, most people are going to think something positive, like, I love you, I'm here for you, you can do this. And then he would say, well, that's prophecy. That's not prophecy. And actually, if you look at biblical prophecy, much more often than not, it is harsh, but it is harsh and done in love, like we see right above here. Nevertheless, he sent them prophets to bring them back to the Lord. They admonished them, but the people would not listen. So it is giving words to guide and direct back to God. That doesn't mean that prophecy can't be something pleasant, but I think what we see more often than not in Scripture is it's correction, calling out, rebuking, things like that. I think that's, Old and New Testament. But verse 20. The Spirit of God enveloped Zechariah, son of Jehoiada the priest. He stood above the people and said to them, "This is what God says. Why are you transgressing the Lord's commands so that you do not prosper? Because you have abandoned the Lord, he has abandoned you." But they conspired against him and stoned him at the king's command in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. King Joash didn't remember the kindness of Zechariah's father. Jehoiada had extended to him, but killed his son. While he was dying, he said, "May the Lord see and demand an account." At the turn of the year, an Aramean army attacked Joash. They entered Judah and Jerusalem and destroyed all the leaders of the people among them and sent all the plunder to the king of Damascus. Although the Aramean army came with only a few men, the Lord handed over a vast army to them, because the people of Judah had abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, so they executed judgment on Joash. When the Arameans saw that Joash had many wounds, they left him, His servants conspired against him and killed him on his bed, because he had shed the blood of the sons of the priest Jehoiada. So he died, and they buried him in the city of David, but they did not bury him in the tombs of the kings. Those who conspired against him were Zabad, son of the Ammonite woman Shemeath, and Jehozabad, son of the Moabite woman Shimrith. The accounts concerning his sons, the many divine pronouncements about him, and the restorations of God's temple are recorded in the writing of the book of Kings. His son Ahaziah became king in his place. Okay, that is all of the reading for today, but as always, we've still got some questions, which I know is everybody's favorite part. Question 1. Athaliah's reign in chapter 22 seeks to destroy David's line. How does God's preservation of Joash challenge us to consider his unyielding commitment to his covenant promises, even when human evil seems to prevail? This is something I think is very important for us to remember. God always keeps his promises. People can try to thwart God's plans, but if God has said he's going to do something, he's going to do it. Now, the only real exception there is if it's a conditional thing, but even then, I mean, God's still saying he's going to do something one way or another, and so he's going to do it. And so we can rest assured knowing that the outcome is not in our hands. Now, it doesn't mean that we have a license to just inaction and not moving or not doing anything. On the contrary, we do need to be working towards God's plan and try to seek what he would want us to do in different areas and things like that. But we can take some solace in knowing that God is sovereign, ultimately, over everything that happens. Question 2. Jehoiada's leadership in chapter 23 restores true worship. How might his example prompt us to reflect on the role of faithful mentors in guiding others back to God's truth and its limits without personal devotion? I think you can definitely see the effects of having good leadership and not. We see here when Jehoiada comes back into power and he gets that authority, he does bring the people back. He leads by example and brings the people back. And even, when he has them put the chest out and they start bringing stuff back and they're repairing the temple and all that, he is doing what he's supposed to do. He is fulfilling his role as the king, and he is showing them how they are to go. They went in, they took down the Asherah poles and things like this. He's getting back to what they're supposed to do. And we see this a few times throughout the reign of kings. There are some kings that go back to how things are supposed to be. Another thing that they mention is that he goes back to the Levitical priest that Moses had set up, or that God had established through Moses. There's a lot of stuff like that. Good leadership ends up being a benefit to Israel through Jehoiada. Question 3. Joash's turn from reform to idolatry in chapter 24 leads to his downfall. How does this reversal invite us to wrestle with the necessity of sustained faithfulness to God and the consequences of abandoning his covenant grace? If you turn your back on God and walk away from him, there are consequences to that. Now, that may be eternal consequences in this life. That may be eternal consequences after this life. It may be something temporary in this life, where even if you turn your back on God, you walk away, and then you come back, there can still be consequences in this life that you have to deal with because of that decision. It doesn't automatically mean everything just goes away, right? So there are consequences to abandoning God and what He has told us to do. The covenant that He has established with us, there are consequences to that. This is why it's important to not just view salvation as like fire insurance. Like you want to live your life in a way that is pleasing to God, because that is going to be what's most beneficial to you. God wants what is best for us, so He's telling us to do things, and He set up rules and established things like that with us because it's for our benefit, right? Okay, I think that is it for today. Appreciate everyone watching and listening up to this point. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I enjoy reading comments and interacting as much as I can. If this has been a benefit to you, consider sharing it with others. The word of mouth is the best way the podcast spreads. So if it's been a benefit to you, you can pass it along to somebody else. And maybe they can get some benefit from it as well. It gives them somebody that they can read along with every single day to keep up a daily Bible reading habit and stick with it. Tomorrow we'll be back in 2nd Chronicles again. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 days left in 2nd Chronicles. So we're coming up on the end of it, but tomorrow we'll be back in it again, and it'll be good. So, thanks. God bless.